Adora's heart pounded as she ran, her feet barely touching the ground. The sun was setting over the bustling town of Aashi, casting an eerie orange glow across the marketplace. Stalls lined the streets, filled with traders shouting their prices, customers bargaining, and the scent of roasted plantains filling the air. But amidst that lively chaos, one shop stood out, the famous butcher shop owned by Mazi Dike. Mazi Dike was a man of few words, always seen in his blood-stained apron, carefully cutting and packaging the finest meat in the town. His customers trusted him, praising the tenderness and freshness of his products. His prices were always fair, that even the poorest families in the village can afford to buy his meat. But what they didn't know was that the source of his meat was far more horrifying than they could ever imagine. It started years ago, when Dike's business was struggling. One night, a desperate and dark deal was made, one that required human sacrifices. Since then, young women in the town had begun to disappear, never to be seen again. Their families searched endlessly, but no one ever suspected the quiet, respectable butcher until Adora. Adora was a fearless journalist known for uncovering the darkest secrets in Aashi. When her best friend Chinyere went missing after visiting the marketplace, Adora became restless. The last place Chinyere was seen, Mazi Dike's shop. Determined to find answers, Adora began watching Dike closely, visiting his shop under the pretense of buying meat. She noticed the way he avoided questions about his suppliers, the way he locked the doors earlier than most traders, and the way his shop always had more than enough meat, even when other butchers ran out. One night, Adora followed him. She watched as he disappeared into the slaughterhouse behind his shop, carrying a large sack over his shoulder. The stench of blood and rotting flesh filled the air, making her stomach churn. She crept closer, peering through a small crack in the wooden wall, and what she saw nearly made her scream. A body hanging upside down, lifeless. Adora's heart pounded as she stepped backward, knocking over a metal pan. The noise echoed through the quiet night. Dike's head snapped up. Their eyes met. A slow, sinister smile spread across his face as he reached for the sharpest knife on his table. Adora turned and ran. But would she be able to make it out alive? Would she be able to expose the horrifying truth about Mazi Dike before she too became just another cut of meat sold in the marketplace? Watch this suspenseful story and find out. Adora's heart pounded as she ran, her feet barely touching the ground. The butcher's slaughterhouse loomed behind her, its dark, blood-soaked walls hiding the horror she had just witnessed. She didn't dare look back. She could hear Mazi Dike's heavy footsteps following her, the sound of a knife scraping against metal as he moved. The marketplace was eerily silent at this hour. Stalls stood empty, their goods covered for the night. Adora's breath came in sharp gasps as she ducked behind a stack of crates, trying to calm herself. "Come out, Adora." Dike's voice was smooth, almost amused. "You have seen too much, haven't you?" Adora clutched her chest, willing herself to stay silent. She could hear his slow footsteps drawing closer. "Curiosity kills, my dear," he continued, his tone chilling. "But don't worry, I'll make sure nothing goes to waste." Adora's stomach churned at the thought of what he meant. She needed a way out, fast. Her eyes darted around the marketplace, searching for an escape. Then she spotted it, the bell tower at the far end of the square. If she could just reach it, she could sound the alarm and wake the town. But getting there wouldn't be easy. She took a deep breath and in one swift movement, bolted from her hiding spot. "Ah, there you are," Dike's voice boomed. She heard him running behind her, fast, too fast. Her lungs burned as she pushed forward, dodging overturned carts and abandoned stores. Just a few more steps. She lunged forward and grabbed the rope hanging from the bell. With all her strength, she yanked it down. The loud chime echoed through the empty town. Light flickered in nearby homes. Dogs barked. Doors creaked open. Dike stopped in his tracks, his face twisted with rage. "You foolish girl," he spat. Adora yanked the rope again. More lights turned on. People were waking up. Dike turned on his heel and disappeared into the shadows, but not before throwing her one last chilling look. This isn't over. Adora collapsed to her knees as the townspeople rushed towards her. She had done it. She had exposed the butcher of Aashi. But deep inside, she knew one thing for sure. Mazi Dike wasn't finished with her yet. The bell's echo still rang in Adora's ears as the townspeople gathered around her, their faces filled with confusion and concern. She was gasping for breath, her hands trembling as she pointed towards Mazi Dike's slaughterhouse. He's a murderer," she cried out. That's meat he sells. It's not from animals. He kills people." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people recoiled in shock, while others exchanged uneasy glances. "Nonsense," an elderly man scoffed. "Mazi Dike has been selling meat in this town for years. If what you're saying is true, we would have known." But it's true," Adora insisted. "I saw it with my own eyes. There was a body hanging in his slaughterhouse. He saw me and he chased me down." The murmurs grew louder. Some villagers seemed horrified, others doubtful. "Where is he now?" someone asked. Adora's stomach twisted. "He ran when I rang the bell, but we need to search his shop now." A few brave men, armed with lanterns and wooden clubs, stepped forward. They moved towards the slaughterhouse, the crowd following cautiously behind. Adora's heart pounded as they pushed open the heavy doors. The scent of blood and raw meat filled the air. The flickering lanterns cast airy shadows on the walls, illuminating the blood-streaked tables and hanging carcasses. But the body she had seen was gone. "It's just a normal butcher's shop," one of the men said. "Where is the proof, Adora?" Adora's mouth went dry. She spun around, her eyes darting frantically. "No, I swear, there was a body here." A chilling realization crept over her. Dike had returned while she was sounding the bell, and he had hidden the evidence. The crowd was growing restless. "You woke us all up for this?" a woman snapped. "This is a dangerous accusation, Adora." "Maybe she imagined it," another villager muttered. No, I didn't. He's lying to all of you," Adora yelled, panic rising in her voice. But no one was listening. They were already turning away, shaking their heads, grumbling about a wasted night. The town elder stepped forward, his gaze stern. "Adora, unless you have proof, I suggest you be careful with your words. A man's reputation is at stake," he warned. Adora wanted to scream. She knew what she saw, but without the body, without undeniable evidence, no one would believe her. As the villagers dispersed, Adora stood frozen, her mind racing, and then a shiver ran down her spine. From the shadows of a nearby alley, two piercing eyes were watching her. Mazi Dike. He was still here, and he was smiling, not in anger, but in amusement. He had cleaned up his mess, and now he was coming for her. Adora's breath hitched as she locked eyes with Mazi Dike. His lips curled into a slow, sinister smile, his expression void of fear, only amusement. He knew he had won tonight. The townspeople had turned against her. The evidence was gone, and now she was alone. Her fingers trembled as she forced herself to look away and walk towards her house, her mind racing. If no one would believe her, she had to find proof, something undeniable that even the elders couldn't ignore. But how? She reached her small home, bolted the door behind her, and pressed her back against it. The house was silent, but her heart pounded loud in her ears. She moved to the window and peered outside. The streets were nearly empty now, but in the distance, standing beneath a flickering street lamp, Dike was still watching her. Adora's stomach twisted. He wasn't just going to let her go. He was waiting for the right moment. She swallowed hard, turned away from the window, and grabbed her lantern. She needed help, but from who? No one in town would listen to her. Then she remembered old Mameze. Mameze was the oldest woman in the village, known for her wisdom and knowledge of the town's dark past. If anyone had heard whispers of missing girls or had suspicions about Mazi Dike, it would be her. Without wasting another second, Adora grabbed her scarf, wrapped it tightly around her shoulders, and slipped out through the back door. The night air was thick with tension as she made her way through the quiet town, sticking to the shadows. Every rustling leaf, every distant footstep made her flinch. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. By the time she reached Mameze's hut, she was breathless. She knocked frantically, whispering, "Mama, please, it's Adora. Open up." For a moment, there was silence. Then the door creaked open, just enough for Adora to see Mameze's wrinkled face. "You saw it, didn't you?" the old woman whispered. Adora's eyes widened. "You know?" Mameze sighed heavily and opened the door wider. "Come inside, child. There are things you must know." The hut smelled of burning herbs and aged wood. Candles flickered on a small table, casting airy shadows across the room. Mameze motioned for Adora to sit. "I have known for years," Mameze said, her voice barely a whisper. But the town did not listen to old women with dark stories. Adora leaned forward, her hands clenched into fists. "Tell me everything." Mameze exhaled slowly, her eyes clouded with memories. Mazi Dike was not always the town busher. She began. Years ago, he was just a struggling meat seller. Then the disappearance began. First, a wandering traveler. Then a poor girl from another village. No one paid attention, but I did. She paused, staring into the candle flame. One night I followed him, like you did. I saw what he does, but when I tried to speak, no one listened, just as they will not listen to you now. Adora's skin prickled with unease. Then how do we stop him? Mameze's gaze turned sharp. You need proof, child, and I know where you will find it. Adora's heart pounded. Where? Mameze hesitated, then leaned in closer. Behind the shop, there is a pit, a deep one. That is where the bodies go. Adora's blood ran cold. She had to go back, but was she ready for what she would find? Adora's fingers clenched the edge of her scarf as Mameze's words settled deep in her bones. A pit behind his shop, a graveyard of his victims. Her throat was dry, but her mind was already made up. She had to see it with her own eyes. But Mama, she whispered, if I go back there, he will be watching. Mameze interrupted, her old eye sharp. But if you are careful, if you move like the night itself, you will see what you need. Adora swallowed hard, then nodded. I have to do this. Mameze studied her for a moment, then reached out into a small clay pot and pulled out a dark folded cloth. Take this, it will keep you unseen if you move wisely. Adora took the clothes, a simple black wrapper, but she knew Mameze's charms were more than ordinary fabric. With one last look at the old woman, she slipped into the night. The village was silent, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Adora kept to the shadows, her feet barely making a sound as she approached the slaughterhouse. Her heart pounded as she crouched behind a wooden crate, her eyes scanning the darkened shop. The door was locked, but she wasn't interested in the front. She crept around the side, slipping between stacks of firewood and old barrels, until she reached the back of the shop. The moonlight barely touched the ground here, but she could make out the uneven dirt, the place where the pit was supposed to be. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Her foot sank slightly. The ground was loose. Her breath hitched. This was it. This was where he buried them. She dropped to her knees and began to dig with her fingers, the dirt cold and damp beneath her nails. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she scrubbed deeper, faster, until she felt something soft. Her breath caught. She pulled back, and in the faint moonlight she saw it. A hand. A human hand. The fingers were stiff, the skin gray and lifeless. Adora's stomach twisted violently. Before she could react, a hand clapped over her mouth. She let out a muffled scream as a strong arm wrapped around her waist, yanking her backward. She kicked, twisted, fought, but it was no use. A low, familiar voice whispered against her ear, sending a shiver of terror down her spine. You should have stayed quiet, Adora. Mazi Dike. Adora trusted in Mazi Dike's grip, but he was too strong. His rough hand pressed over her mouth, muffling her screams, while the other arm locked around her waist like an iron cage. I warned you, he murmured, his breath hot against her ear, but she couldn't leave things alone. Terror surged through Adora as he began dragging her towards the slaughterhouse. The scent of raw meat and blood filled her nostrils, making her stomach churn. She knew what happened inside those walls. If she went in, she wouldn't come out. No, she refused to die like this. Desperation fueled her strength. She beat down hard on his palm. Mazi Dike let out a sharp curse and loosened his grip, just enough for her to twist free. Adora spun, kicking him hard in the chin. He stumbled back, his eyes burning with rage. You little... She didn't wait for him to recover. She turned and ran. Her feet pounded against the earth as she sprinted through the darkened village. The cool night air whipped against her face, but she didn't dare look back. She could hear him, his footsteps, his furious breath. He was chasing her. If he caught her now, she was dead. Adora veered off the main path, darting between huts and leaping over abandoned baskets. She needed to reach Mameze's hut. She was the only one who would believe her. But just as she surrounded a corner, Mazi Dike lunged from the shadows. She let out a sharp cry as he tackled her to the ground, her head hitting the death hard. Stars exploded in her vision as she gasped for breath. You couldn't just mind your business, he snarled, pinning her down. His hands wrapped around her throat, squeezing. Darkness crept into her vision. Adora clawed at his hands, her lungs burning, her heartbeat slowing. Then, a loud crack. Mazi Dike stiffened, his grip loosened, his mouth fell open in shock, and then he collapsed. Adora gasped for air, coughing violently. As her vision cleared, she saw a figure standing over her. Amazing. The old woman held a thick wooden staff, her face green. I told you, child, he was watching you. Adora sat up, still trembling. Mazi Dike lay motionless, blood pooling beneath her head. Was he dead?
Mamaze knelt beside her.
We must hurry. The village must see what he has done before his men come looking for him. Adora nodded, swallowing back her fear. It wasn't over yet. Adora's heart was still racing as she looked at Mazi's lifeless body, his blood seeping into the dirt. Mazi's stab had struck him with brutal precision, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire world had stopped. The weight of what they had done, what they had discovered, hung in the air like a thick fog. "We need to act quickly," Mazi said, her voice low and urgent, "before his men come looking." Adora nodded, still dazed. They couldn't waste time. They had to expose the truth, and the people needed to know what Mazi Dike had been hiding all these years. Mazi took a deep breath, then raised her staff high, the gesture commanding attention even in the dead of the night. "People of the village," she called out, her voice ringing out with an authority Adora hadn't heard before. Come and see what your butcher has done." Within moments, light flickered from the windows of the nearby houses. Villagers began trickling into the streets, their faces a mix of curiosity and confusion. Adora stepped back, her stomach twisted with dread as she felt all eyes on her. Was she ready for what was about to happen? The man who had butchered so many years was lying dead in the streets. Yet, it wasn't just his death she wanted to expose, it was his monstrous secrets. The crowd grew, murmurs rising in the air. Some of the men, thinking it was a fight or a misunderstanding, held lanterns in their hands. But when they saw Mazi Dike's body lying there, cold and lifeless, everything changed. "What is it?" one of the men asked, stepping forward. "What is going on?" Adora stepped into the light, her voice trembling but determined. "This man, Mazi Dike, he has been killing women for years." She took a shaky breath. "He didn't just sell meat, he sold human flesh." The crowd gasped, some stepping back, others coughing in disbelief. But then Adora took another step, her voice stronger. "I saw it. I saw the pits behind his shop, the bodies he buried there. He killed them, butchered them, and sold them as meat." A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads, still unbelieving. But Mama Eze was already motioning for the people to follow her. She led them to the back of the slaughterhouse where the pit was. As they arrived, Adora's heart was pounding in her chest. She could still feel Dike's cold grip around her throat, the suffocating fear of being his next victim. But this time, she wasn't the only one scared. They dug together, slowly, carefully, until the pit was revealed. A mass grave of twisted, decomposing bodies. The sight was enough to make even the bravest men recoil. This can't be," a voice faltered. "See for yourselves," Mazi said, her voice steady and calm. "This is the truth." And the truth was undeniable. One by one, the villagers began to step back, horror painting their faces. It didn't take long for them to realize that the meat they had been eating for years wasn't from cows or goats. It was from people, young women who had disappeared, whose lives were taken to feed Dike's insidious operation. And now, Adora's fear shifted. The men who worked with Dike, his accomplices, would know what had happened. They would come for them. "We need to stop them before they can take revenge," Adora said, looking at Mazi, fear creeping into her voice. The old woman's eyes narrowed. "You are right, but the village must stand together. If we are to expose him fully, we must show the people he wasn't the only one. The rest of his network must be exposed too." As the villagers gathered around the pit, their faces grim, Adora made a decision. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about stopping the cycle. "Gather the elders," Adora said, determination creeping into her voice. "We need to show them everything, the truth, his network." Mazi nodded, a glimmer of approval in her eyes. "You are not the girl who came to me with fear, Adora. You are a force now. Let's finish this." It wasn't long before the village elders arrived, their faces stern and their eyes filled with suspicion. But as they saw the evidence, the bodies, the butcher's secrets, they couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Adora stood tall, her voice steady as she spoke. "We have to end this now." The elders, once silent, began to speak among themselves. They had always turned a blind eye to the whispers and rumors, but now the truth was undeniable. As the sun began to rise, the villagers stood united. The butcher's reign was over. But Adora knew that Mazi Dike's death would not be the end. His network was vast. There were others out there, lurking in the shadows, and she would make sure they didn't escape. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you have learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. See you on the next one. Thank you and God bless. Bye.